Hey yogis, welcome to Restorative Yoga. So in the email I said to grab one ball, but if you've got two handy, go ahead and take a moment to grab a second one. Ideally they're the same, so like two tennis balls or two therapy balls, probably not lacrosse balls. Those are just going to be too intense, and your muscles are going to tense up instead of relax. So for the rolling portion, two balls would be best. If you've only got one, no worries. I'll give you a cue halfway through to swap shoulders, or when we use two balls. So to start class today, we're going to find a comfy seat. Whatever that looks like for you. If you didn't see the email, make sure you've got a blanket, one, ideally two balls, two blocks or rolled towels. Most likely that's going to be your best bet, but if you want a little bit more forceful pressure from the block, and you don't have yoga blocks, you could cover books with a blanket. If you like that kind of deep tissue massage under the shoulder blades for that particular heart opener where you have blocks at two heights. But to start class, we're going to come to a seat. Just finding a comfy seat for you. Maybe, I am super off my mat, that's all right. Maybe it's cross-legged, maybe it's on the bolster or a blanket. Maybe you have your legs out long. Maybe you really like to sit in sage pose on your knees with your hips on your heels. That is never my first choice seat. Maybe you've got some pets joining you. So, you know, just settle in. Finding that seat. Maybe closing your eyes as you arrive on your mat. Settling and pausing. If you've got any technology around, a smartwatch, a smartphone, go ahead and put it on Do Not Disturb. And if you, whatever screen you're using, if that is not on Do Not Disturb, you might want to give yourself that hour treat of no interruptions. And then you can just settle into the practice. As you pause, maybe you check in. See where tension might be hiding or blatantly yelling. And just start to begin to acknowledge that sensation, perhaps deepening the breath, sending that breath toward tension in your body. As you sit, check in with your posture, feeling shoulders stacking over hips. That back of the head as if it's pressing into something. You can even put your hand behind your head. Press your head into it, then leave the head and move the hand. Just feeling some alignment through the spine that sometimes we think we've found. We tend to pronate our chin. And as you pause, perhaps you set an intention. Maybe that intention is one of gratitude, honoring time that you carve out for yourself. That can be hard to do when times are normal. I'm finding it harder, personally, as the semester begins with course overloads, varied modalities of teaching. Feels like I'm constantly working. And so perhaps really focusing on the time you carve for yourself. Restorative yoga is a great opportunity for that. It helps us slow down, reminds us that it's not always the work we put behind the posture, but how the posture works for us. Taking a nice deep inhale as your arms reach high. Exhale, size it out as the hands come to heart center. Finding 2 more breaths like that together. Inhale, arms reach. Exhale, sigh. 1 more. Centering into our practice. And then letting the hands rest once more on the knees or thighs. Just taking some gentle half moons. Creating some mobility across the back of the neck. Massaging the throat. If your regular day-to-day life asks you to do a lot of communicating, a nice massage from the front of the throat, checking in with that throat chakra is always a great tool. As that tick-tock evens out, we'll pause the head in the center and then stack back up onto the spine. And just gently turning the chin over the shoulders. Isolated movement here. We're only moving the head, so you're not twisting at the shoulders or slouching forward or leaning. Just the head moves. We'll revisit these after we use some rolling on the shoulders and traps. Bringing the head center, one last one. Ears to shoulders, up and over. That pace of tick-tock is totally up to you. But you might find slower or faster serves your body best. And evening that out as the head pauses in neutral. Maybe shoulders roll up, back, and down a few times. You can even do one shoulder and then the other. As we start our practice, we're going to actually make our way down to our back. Do be sure that your ball or balls are handy. I have recently started taking class where we use yoga therapy balls. It's a whole different certification, so I'm not obviously teaching that, but those are the balls that I've started using. They've got a little bit of give, they're a little more solid than a tennis ball, but they're softer than lacrosse, and they also actually grip your skin. I know that at the studio, we used to use sort of those rubber balls. They have a similar feel to them, those pink rubber balls we used to use at the studio. But they're a little more solid, not quite as squishy. So make sure your balls are handy. I'm seeing how many times I can say that. I know you're loving that. And also be sure a block is handy. You might choose to prop your hips up on a block once we get settled down. And so you kind of want to set up your space for that purpose. If you have your hair down or you got a lot of little wispies down in the back of your neck, you might want to get your hair up and out of the way. It's easy to accidentally tangle your hair up in whatever kind of ball you're using. So as we settle onto the mat, you can simply lower the spine down and hug the knees in. Just take a couple gentle sways. Feeling how your spine feels against the mat, where your shoulders are. Then plant your feet on the floor. Feet are about hip distance apart. If you're like me and you got a dog in the way, you might not quite hit hip distance, and that's okay. Reaching your arms straight above your shoulders, so you really kind of plug the shoulder blades down and back into the mat. Just do a mobility check here. Reaching the hands down, thumbs touch behind you. Maybe they don't. And then bring them back up. Pinkies touch the floor by your legs. Going through this motion 2 or 3 times, just simply noticing how it feels. Paying attention particularly to the shoulders, perhaps as they gently massage against the mat. Then after you've done it one more time, we'll bring the arms above the shoulders and let the hands drop out to that T shape as you windshield up with the knees from side to side. So if you're going to do one trap at a time, I'll give you a cue about halfway through. Otherwise, just kind of explore the sensation of the pressure of both balls throughout the time when you work through these. So you're going to take your 2, ideally 2, if not just 1. You're going to find the tops of your traps. You're going to have the ball right inside that kind of little nook that you find there. You might have to shimmy shake the ball up or down. There'll be a couple opportunities to also shimmy the ball a little bit lower down the spine. A couple of things to be really conscious of here is 1, we're not putting the ball on the spine. If it goes farther down into the back toward the bottom of our shoulder blades, it's going down your spinal column on either side. There's about the width of the ball between your shoulder blade and your spine. If you'd like, you can, 2 options. You can press into bridge. Oh, it's too low, here we go. And just maybe hang out here. It's a lot. So a block underneath your hips might give you a little bit of release. And maybe just start with a few breaths of stillness. If you've got 1 ball, you can still use the block under your hips. Then you might start a little sort of shift. I actually shift through my feet, which wiggles through the hips, and then gently massages my traps and upper shoulder on the ball. If you find a place that's particularly sticky, maybe you pause there. If you've got 1 ball, you can still sway from side to side, just kind of knowing that you'll switch halfway through to hop onto that other shoulder. And as you kind of dig in there, you might even do a little bit of a chug, pressing into the feet, moving up and down ever so slightly. It's a very minor movement here. Massaging those traps. Feeling free to scoot the balls down. You could walk your shoulders to do that. You could also take your hands and shove the ball maybe an inch or 2 down and noticing those sensations. This is very much a listen to your body kind of thing. You may need stillness and just kind of get that deep digging pressure. You know, back when we often went for massages. Maybe you even shimmy again with the ball farther down the back. Or 2 balls, yeah. If you have a single ball, now would probably be a good time to swap sides. If you want to get farther down underneath the shoulder blade before you do that, you might shimmy the ball down, massage there for 5 to 7 breaths, and then go ahead and swap. If you've got 2 balls, you can shimmy the balls a little bit farther down Ideally, they're in line with each other, but most likely they're a little bit uneven. We're just gonna work those balls a little bit farther down, eventually arriving underneath the shoulder blades. If you are feeling feisty, you can bring your hands behind your neck, supporting as you lift up like you're gonna do a crunch. You could walk the shoulders or even roll up and down. I don't love that one, my body doesn't love it. So I kind of like to do it more incrementally. Like I said, if you're doing one ball, do be sure you've gone ahead and switched sides. We've got another 2 minutes, and I want to make sure that you spend equal amounts of time on each side of your body. Sometimes I just need to, as I move the balls down, to take a few breaths before I start moving. I will say if you're not using the block, it does become a little more intense. You can also do this activity against the wall. Once again, reducing intensity level and meeting your body where it is currently. And as I get farther down my back toward the bottoms of my shoulder blades, I do like to scoot my block out of the way and kind of go into that supported crunch position, shift between the ball and my head on the floor. Just really getting up underneath that shoulder blade. It's where I hold a lot of tension and get a lot of knots. So it's pretty intense today. After you've worked down there for a few rounds of breath, we got probably about 45 seconds to a minute left. So you can stay down there. You could roll up and down a few times, or maybe you want to revisit those tracks. If you're using two, if you're using one, you're kind of working down that side like you did on the first shoulder. You might even find you have one shoulder that needs a little more love. So I removed one of the balls, and I'm doing that on that one side. And then finishing it out, reaching. This part's not always graceful for the balls. Then letting your spine meet the mat. If you still got the block under your hips, go ahead and let it move. And just feel your shoulders spreading out, relaxing onto the mat. We're going to check back in with that mobility check. Hands reaching straight up, plugging the shoulders down and back, and then dropping the thumbs back. Oh, my God, it's definitely in the way now. Dropping the thumbs back, and then bringing the pinkies down. You might find it's easier. You might find you can actually touch evenly. Sometimes one hand, you might even pause and let the backs of the hands rest. You might feel the palms reaching pretty far away because you've created that space. And then give yourself a gentle rocking roll from side to side, and then rock it up to a seat. Keep your balls handy, but we're going to pause and take a posture or two, focusing in on that space you've created, using that to your advantage as we find a nice supported heart opener with our blocks. This one can be a little intense, so you're welcome to choose to use your bolster and make that recliner if you prefer. But if you're going to use the blocks, you're going to settle the blocks so that the lower block, right? I know that my body likes medium and high, but you might find that today your body needs it slightly differently, a low and a medium perhaps. I will say that if this posture is uncomfortable, it is most likely the placement or height of the lower block. For me, the corners of the block are underneath that chicken wing part of your shoulder blade. So use that as you will. You might find you need to move it up or down slightly, and that's totally acceptable. As you settle in, you're going to want to keep your feet probably flat on the floor or legs extended out to start, just so that you can get a feel for how your body wants to settle in. So you settle your low block first, finding that sort of sports bra chicken wing line. Then you reach back, tuck your chin to the chest, set the base of your skull on the block, and then surrender onto the props. If you're using blankets, this may not be particularly intense, but if you've got blocks, you'll find the corners of the block or the edge are kind of mimicking that sensation of massaging the shoulders with the ball. As you settle in, maybe your legs extend, knees can continue facing the ceiling, or perhaps you bring the bottoms of your feet together and get a gentle heart opener or hip opener as well. So here, the blocks are providing support and stability so that you can open the heart for a longer period of time. We use longer holds in our postures in restorative yoga so we can move beyond stretching the muscles and the flexibility of those fibers as we target some of the more deeper muscles and connective tissue. You might even find the longer you stay, that each posture goes through a series of sensations. Here are your inhales, billow through the belly and the chest. And the exhales make the shoulders feel heavy, as if they could drop between the blocks onto the mat. Just sitting with the sensation of this posture. As you reverse our technology hunker, whatever that looks like for you. We all have a hunker of some sort, whether it's sitting at our computer, moving our thumbs on a phone, swiping on a tablet, gripping a steering wheel, or maybe even holding a book. So much of our day-to-day life rocks us forward, hunkering over, closing the heart. Our last minute or so of this posture, maybe you gently shake the head no across the block. Massaging the back of the skull. In the first week of the semester, I've had 2 migraines. I usually maybe have 1 migraine a month. So there's just a lot of stress and tension. So often, massaging here toward the base of the skull, behind, kind of between, right behind the ears, in the center of the skull. It's a great place. You can even take thumbs there to massage and release tension. But find a spot Maybe you can blink your eyes and you can start to feel where those muscles activate. And if you've got a lot of eye strain, many of us have been staring at the computer or any screen far more than we're used to. It's a nice way and place to relieve tension. This particular posture, if you've had a long day of sitting at a screen or driving, is also just a really nice way to let your body recover from that seated position. If you took that head nod, go ahead and return center. Then you can guide yourself up, however you so choose. I like to press through one hand as I guide my head up, and then make my way up to a seat. As you arrive upright, maybe you gently circle the head, and just kind of notice how the shoulders feel. We're going to take one more supported posture for our shoulders before kind of moving down into the hips and glutes, and then the low back. So this one kind of helps us target the fronts of our shoulders. We've been hitting the back line of our body. We're going to kind of tap into the fronts of the shoulders here a little bit. So this one happens on your belly, and we use our blocks. Most likely, your blocks are going to be on medium side, but they, if you're feeling real feisty, could be on high side, but I personally find that to be too intense. But you also might want a slightly more gentle version with the block on the low side. So this one is on your belly, and you have your blocks up toward where your head is. You might want to have your blanket up there as well, just in case you've got yourself too close to the edge of the mat, and you can rest your head on the mat, on the blanket instead of the floor. So as we settle into this one, we are bringing the blocks as we lay down, kind of here-ish. Yeah, they're kind of nestling in to the front of the shoulder. You're not really pressing on the collarbone, that hurts. You're kind of finding that space in between. That's why I personally like the medium side. Then you settle in, belly down, arms onto the block. Maybe your head finds the floor, maybe you roll your blanket. Bring the floor a little bit closer to you. Might take a second to shift those blocks where best serves you. Arms are also kind of up to you. You might open them out T-shape. They might also be tops of the hands to the floor, a little bit closer to your hips. If you got your cheek to one side, feel free to do so. I'll give you a cue about halfway through to swap cheeks. Another nice option is to have the forehead to the mat or blanket. As you breathe here, you might feel the inhales expanding through the side body and the back, as the exhales melt you over your block. If you have a cheek turn, go ahead and swap cheeks. I feel this particular posture, sorry about that. It's like when somebody comes up behind you and you've had a kind of rough day and they roll your shoulders up, back, and down for you. Maybe you give yourself a gentle shimmy of the shoulders. Then you can press through the hands and shift back into a brief child's pose. As you pause, maybe you choose to extend your arms long. Maybe you bend at the elbows, bring the thumbs to the base of the neck, the nape of your neck. The first part of our practice has really focused on the thoracic spine and up, creating some space, maybe feeling some mobility there. Maybe you shimmy out and circle out the shoulders. As we shift now, kind of skipping the lumbar spine, although opening through the hips and using the ball as a massage tool there also helps find space in the way back. So we're moving back onto our spine. Feel free to give yourself a neck roll with your blanket if that feels comfortable. You only need one ball this time. If you're using something like yoga therapy balls that come in pairs, you might use one ball for one glute and the other for the other. And as we settle in here, you can catch the knees and lay yourself down, finding a position that is comfortable for your body here. Knees can stay bent to start. I was gonna have a neck roll, but it's gotten weird. There we go. Now I'm gonna start with my right hip because it's closer to the camera and you'll kind of be able to see what we're going for here. So we're gonna start with the ball at the top of our hip. So at the very top edge of the glute. You can start it in the center, you can start it off to the side. And at first you're just gonna pause. You've got a little bit of asymmetry happening now. You're just gonna let your body and the muscles start to kind of drop over that ball. When you're ready, you can press through your left foot. And just sway your hips from side to side. You're pressing into your right foot as well, but the opposite foot is doing more of the work. Just swaying from side to side, kind of rolling across the top of your glute. Maybe even over to the edge out here and all the way back in. Similar to when we were rolling through the shoulders, the placement of the ball, the intensity level, the more you push into both feet, the less intense it becomes. Just swaying the hips. Maybe you circle the hips a little. And then after a few moments or so, you can pause in the center and scoop the ball down. Maybe moving more now through the knee part of the glute. Here is a nice kind of place to find the center and just sit into it. You could do a contract and release. Oh, the ball go. Move. You could extend that leg and continue through those rolls and sways. Planting the right foot on the mat, again, reduces intensity level. You can sway, you can circle, you could squeeze and release. Just really opening through that hip and glute. Maybe the ball moves down once more. I personally really like the extended leg option. You could even just open the hip out and turn it in. Ooh, you might find a spot where you're like, oh, I need to stay there. Hurts so good kind of spot. But remember, we're not looking for pain here. We're looking for sensation. That sensation might be intense, but it actually should not hurt. Spending about 3 minutes per side here. You can really dig in and settle in. The last option I'll offer, but you can of course continue rolling through that hip however best serves you, is to bend your right leg, shift your hips over slightly to the left. You can't see because there's a dog. And just open that knee, and the ball kind of pins there on the outer hip. And you might just need to stay still. That's what I need. But you could take a little bit of a chug, pressing through your left foot. You could close the knees and open the leg back out, but that's a lot of effort. You'll find that spot where you're like, oh, just melting over your prop. Taking any final sways or swishes or chugs on this side. And then we'll scoop that ball out from underneath you and let both legs just stretch out long. You might feel a pretty drastic difference. Those right toes might really flop out and open, whereas the left toes just don't quite reach the mat or floor in the same way. Good news, we're gonna do both sides. So then, setting up for your second side, you take the ball. I like to start with 2 knees bent, feet planted on the floor, press my hips up, let them go on the bridge. And we started at the top of the glute. When I'm there, personally, I like to have both knees bent, but you could go ahead and extend that foot out if you so choose. You might just take a moment. First, your body's like, whoa, I feel off kilter. And then it starts to settle into the ball. And you can press into your feet and swish from side to side, massaging the top of the glute. Maybe starting to feel some space to the low back from this use of the ball. And as you're ready, you move the ball down about 1 inch to 2 inches. Maybe this time you stretch the leg out. You're a little bit closer to that center, meatiest part of the glute. So maybe your leg is comfortable, extended out. Maybe not. Maybe 2 feet bent works best for you. You just kind of roll, pause. You could do a squeeze and release. Should have said this at the beginning, but you can also roll your hips against the wall. It reduces intensity and pressure that may be too much. When I post this video to YouTube, I'll make sure that I list that in your comments or descriptions. Got about a minute or so left, so maybe the ball moves a little bit farther down. And then that last option, to let the left knee open out to the side. Your hips move slightly to the right so you can pin that ball underneath that outer hip. You could sway there. You can even just press your right hip forward and back, really massaging into that left hip. Taking some final sways or wiggles. It might help you find the last little bit of release through those hips. And you can move that ball out from underneath you. And let both legs extend long. Maybe now you feel a little more even on that foot flop. And then you can plant your feet on the mat. Then guide your knees toward your chest. Then rock yourself up to a seat. Setting up, this particular posture does focus there in the lumbar spine, but I find that when you roll through your hips and glutes, you can also feel some release through this upper hip area, right around the top of your glutes as well. Those of you that have been practicing my restorative classes with me, you know this is one of my favorites. I call it butt up. I really ought to learn its more yogic name, but I kind of like butt up pose, so I'm gonna just stick with that. So for this one, you need your bolster or your pillow stack. You might need your blanket, and you might need it toward the top of your mat. If you're using your blanket, you might just have it for cushion, or depending on how this posture feels on your body, you might have it sort of rolled so that you have more of a slope versus a cliff off of your bolster. Yogi's choice, of course, here. Option also to have your blocks handy. If you really loved that shoulder opener with the blocks here, I'll give you a cue at some point as we settle in. You can pop those blocks underneath your shoulders here as well. Kind of a nice combo position. So they can be up the top of the mat, just in case you need them later. So as you settle in, the back of the bolster hits at the hip crease. So you shimmy down, laying your hips over the bolster, and then surrendering the body over the bolster. Here you might want to bring the blanket to give you a little bit more of a slope. Arms are really up to you here. You can have them out to the T, you can have them by your side. You can use them as a pillow. As you settle in, just simply let the breath become quiet. Almost like a ninja. It's stealthy and gentle. This posture is a
Sometimes a tricky one. You're actually finding release in your psoas, which is why the breath is ninja-like. As you find that release, you'll start to feel space through the lumbar spine, and perhaps a release of tension through the hips. If you have your cheek turned one way, you can go ahead and swap sides. There would also be the opportunity, if you so choose, to shimmy those blocks underneath the shoulder. You can do low blocks, or medium. Or you can say no blocks at all. Or you could be like me and you thought you wanted those blocks, but you don't. You can move them at any time. We've got about 1 more minute here. You might even gently slide the tops of your feet down the mat, like you're walking your knees away. You might feel some interesting sensation and space through the low back and the hips. You're also, of course, welcome to remain in stillness. Then as you're ready, you can press through the hands, shift the hips back to meet the heels, forearms, forehead, and rest on your bolster. And gently bringing yourself up. Just noticing how the entire back line of the body feels. You might also feel some sensation through the front line, but basically noticing how from the hips up, your spine feels. Perhaps you've found some decompression. Perhaps you've released some tension. Just acknowledging how the shift between external pressure and movement, right, using the balls, and longer holds supported in our postures have allowed the back line of the body from the hips up to hopefully become soothed, relaxed, and released. Then when you're ready, you can bring yourself down to the mat. Making sure any props you're going to want in your Shavasana are handy. If you happen to be a legs up the wall Shavasana, or maybe shimmy over that way. And then we'll guide ourselves down, feet planted, spine articulates down, and knees hug to the chest. Just gently feeling the spine, and the shoulders on the mat. Maybe you sway. Maybe you stay still. When arms come out T-shape, gently let the knees drop to the left side of your mat, taking a gentle supine twist. Adding any variation your body enjoys as you find just a smidge more space through the hips, shoulders, and spine. Then you can gently bring the knees up and over and let them drop to your second side. Just giving the body and the spine a little bit more space to allow for comfort and surrender when you arrive in your Shavasana. And bringing your knees back center. Maybe you hug them in tight. Maybe you find a happy baby or a very gentle inversion. Whether if you're at the wall, you can take legs up the wall. If you're away from the wall, you can just let the legs extend up, stacked over the hips. Just finding any final posture that will allow your body to surrender. Could be a windshield wiper of the knees, or maybe you're already ready. So as you begin to settle, perhaps you snuggie in with some of your props. You could take the bolster under your knees. You could have a blanket roll under your neck. If you happen to be cold, you could cover up with your blanket. Just finding a space of complete comfort to completely surrender. Letting go of expectation. And finding surrender. Embracing these final moments that you're taking for yourself. I know in home practice, it's very easy to walk away before you finish Shavasana. But Shavasana is equally, if not more so, important as every other posture in your practice. It gives the body and mind time to reconnect, to settle, so that the practice and the postures can have the most benefit. Just giving your body these last few minutes to rest and revel in the restoration of the postures. And of course, feeling free to remain in Shavasana as long as your mind and body need. But if you're ready, you can begin by deepening the breath, consciously filling the front side of the body, and then sighing it out with your exhale. Then you can begin to find any movement that serves your body. Depending on where you settled for Shavasana, might decide what that movement looks like. If your legs are up the wall, you really want to bend the knees and eventually roll to your favorite side. If you're supine, maybe you plant your feet on the floor and windshield wiper the knees, or maybe your movement is smaller than that. Just wiggling at the fingers and toes. Eventually, you guide yourself up to a seat. Maybe you hug the knees to the chest first. Perhaps you roll to one side. Just eventually arriving seated as we begin class. Spine is long, joints are stacked. Then we inhale together as our palms reach high, meeting at the top. Exhale, hands pause at your third eye. As you seek openness of mind, they rest at your lips so that you find honest words and they settle at your heart as you arrive at a happy heart. Thank you for allowing me to be your guide for your practice. Namaste. Hope you have a great week, and I'll see you guys next time.
Make sure you drink a goodly amount of water. We did a lot of rolling, similar to a deep tissue massage.
So you want to make sure that you drink a little bit of water at least to help your body with that.